Welcome to this show, brought to you by the black magic of voodoo. Specifically this. This is a Gainward Dragon Series 3000, which is a VooDoo2 card. In its box, as you can see. I bought this months and months ago, in like the middle of last year, or even maybe the beginning of last year. And in typical fashion, I opened it, took a quick look, and put it on a shelf. So I don't even know if it works. Of course, it'll be way too late to return it if it doesn't. But we'll find out in a second. So I picked my trusty Dell XPS D300 Pentium 2 machine. Machine dear to my heart because back in the day I had the XPS D266. So pretty similar to a machine, probably the first machine that I think I bought with my own money, the first like complete system. So yeah, I like this machine, and I'm going to give it some 3D balls with this card right now. Of course, we need a 2D card to pair with this, and I picked this. So this is a Matrox Mystique 220. It's a 2 megabyte version, and it's got an expansion board on there with another 2 megs. So that's a 4 megabyte card. So we need to get this in and installed first before we can take a look at the Voodoo. Cards in, we just need to get the drivers on. And yeah, hats off to Matrox. They still have everything on their website, and not only everything, but you know, drivers were often developed way beyond the sort of shelf life of some of these old cards as well. So it's cool. Install was pretty straightforward. I did actually think about having a quick look at this card because it's capable of some kind of basic 3D stuff as well. And I did think about maybe running Matrox 3D and Tomb Raider or something, and then comparing it with the VooDoo2, but I think I'll leave that to another day. That's all up and running, so on to the exciting bit. So here we've got the Dragon Series 3000, driven by the black magic of the Voodoo chipset. So it looks like this card came in both 8 and 12 meg versions. I'll flip it over, and yeah, just in case you didn't catch it on the front, driven by the black magic of the Voodoo chipset. The Dragon series offers unparalleled graphics performance. And then at the bottom it tells us this is a 12 meg card, so that's cool. Looking on the edge of the box, just in case you didn't catch it on the front and the back, yeah, it's driven by the black magic of the Voodoo chipset. And on the other side. And on the other side. So yeah, they really wanted you to know that. Time to open it up and see what goodies we have awaiting within. So it's got a pass-through cable, which is cool, so don't have to go hunting for one of those. Looks like pretty much everything's here, actually. I possibly wonder if maybe there was an SLI link cable in here originally. I think there's 1 or 2 other videos I've seen on YouTube that have the link cable in the box. This has got the driver's disc, so I like having original driver's discs and installing it the way that it would normally be installed, instead of going and like finding stuff off whatever site. You know, I guess you get a bit more performance out of more recent drivers in some cases, but generally I just think it's nice to install it from a real installation disc. It just gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. There's not a whole lot that's very useful in this user guide. There's multiple languages in here, so you just get like 2 or 3 pages of each. Tells you the difference between an ISA, a PCI and an AGP slot, just in case you didn't know already. Just in case you're opening your machine for the first time and about to try and ram your PCI Voodoo into an ISA slot. And then we've got a little baggie that looks big enough for a motherboard, and another anti-static baggie, and there's the card itself. So this one looks a little bit different to other sort of reference boards that seem to be kicking around at the time. From what I've read and what I gather, they just tweaked it a little bit and gave it a few modifications. I think this might be the only one that has heat sinks on it as well, because usually it's just the naked chips, I think. Gainward survive until this day, continually making graphics cards. So that's cool. It's always nice to see companies from that era who have managed to weather the storm. So many dropped out, like when it comes to Voodoo's, it was Guillemot, or Guillemot, however you want to pronounce it, the French company that started Ubisoft, who made hardware, who don't make hardware anymore. And I just always think it's a shame that these companies often fell by the wayside, but here's one that made a success. So unboxing out the way, I've opened up a PCI slot next to the Matrox, and we'll just pop the card in there, and then we can lift this beautiful beige monster into its correct orientation so that it becomes the towering monolith that it ought to be. and then we can just spin it around. So we're going to pop the VGA cable out of the Matrox and put it into the output of the VooDoo, and then stick the link cable in to hook them all up together. Time to pop that original driver disk in there, and let's get this thing installed and run some crazy 3D stuff. Damn, I was really looking forward to installing this disc, because I've got a couple of other original 3DFX discs, and you know, the artwork, the 3DFX logo and all that kind of stuff is really iconic, so it's nice when people make a nice installer based around all of that, and you get demos and loads of other, you know, it's bloat, but it's fun, nostalgic bloat. But this had nothing. I mean, this, you just use Windows driver update, you know, new hardware detection to just go straight to the CD and pull the drivers off. There's no UI, no nothing, no demos. So yeah, it was a bit of a bummer, but never mind. But at least because of that, it was a very, very quick install. So a quick reboot and we're back in, and straight away when we go into our graphics properties, we can see we've got a VooDoo2 tab. And when you first go back in, the first thing it does is it prompts you to run this 3DFX sweep tool. So it looks for duplicate drivers and renames older ones, I guess, just to keep your system nice and clean. I don't know if that's because they assume you're upgrading from a VooDoo 1 or something like that. I'm not sure. Anyway, I ran it and it didn't find anything. The basic settings screen, you ain't got much. Resolution, refresh rate, and then you've got your gamma correction sliders, which can be tied together, and then there's just a drop down to select to either run only in Direct 3D or only in Glide, or both. There's this nice little tab where it's got links to all of the old 3DFX websites and places for downloading the SDKs and stuff like that. Oh, if only they were still around. We've got advanced settings, so a bit more nitty-gritty stuff in here. We've got a system info screen, which gives us a summary of all of our driver versions, so we know where we're at. And yeah, you can see there, so it's using 8 megabytes for texture memory, and it's using the other 4 meg for a frame buffer. And just when I was feeling sorry that there was nothing glamorous going on with this install software, I found this little tip box in the advanced settings at the bottom of the screen where it said enhance my desktop, and I thought, wonder what that could be. And look at that, bang! Is that not the coolest thing you've ever seen? I mean, it's just a simple piece of wallpaper. I don't know whether this was a specific Gainwood wallpaper or a 3DFX one or what, but that's cool. That's worth everything. That just makes everything better. So that's just super cool. That's going to be my desktop background on this machine forever, I think. Okay, so we just need to get the thing ready to play now. Back into advanced settings. I'm just going to try my luck with everything turned on for Direct 3D and everything turned on for Glide. I'm not sure what that limit texture memory to 2 megabytes is for Glide apps, but we'll find out. In fact, we do find out, which you'll see in a second. Well, the only way to make sure the VooDoo2 works is to play some games. So I've selected some here. There's a bit of a mix. We've got HalfLife Generation, which has the original Half-Life. It has Counter-Strike and the expansion Opposing Forces in it. This is not a Glide game, and I think it runs on Direct 3D, but it's an OpenGL game, and I thought I'd throw this one in there because the VooDoo is going to use the mini GL driver, and I think 3DFX were like the first people to do that, to take a cut down on the OpenGL specification and just tailor it to their graphics hardware. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks. And then we've got European Air War, which is a game I played back in the day. I don't think I played it on a VooDoo, but it supports Glide, so we'll have a look at that. Airfix Dogfighter is a bit more of a recent game, so this one will actually push all of the hardware, including the processor, because it's minimum specs of 300 megahertz Pentium 2, or 300 megahertz processor of some description, which is what this is. And then Recoil, which is a game I haven't tried yet, I don't think. So this is actually a Spanish boxed version. I've been trying to collect Westwood games, and this was one of the harder to find ones, hence why I had to put a Spanish version. So it's a shooter. I'm not expecting there to be any language problems, hopefully. think we'll try Half-Life first, so we'll get that installed, and while that's installing we can have a look and see if there's any interesting goodies in these big boxes, which there quite often is. Alas, not in this one. There's just a little sort of feeble leaflet, and that's about it. Actually, I spoke too soon. There's a catalogue, a Blizzard and Sierra catalogue, so yeah, it's kind of nice looking through and seeing what kind of games are out at the same time as this. So lots of Half-Life related stuff. Ground Control, I've got that, and there's another one I haven't played, but that's more my kind of game, sort of strategy game. Homeworld, one of my favourite games ever. And Cataclysm as well. I've never played Cataclysm, so I might have to get that as well. Okay, we're up and running, so I think we'll start by taking a quick look at it in Direct 3D at 800 by 600 and see what that looks like. And so this is the famous tram ride that opens this game that I've read about but never seen, and here it is right in front of me, first time ever. So in Direct 3D it looks a little bit kind of blocky. There's all the textures are kind of big squares on the side, and it's a little bit juddery as well. It looks okay, I could play that.
In the event of an emergency, passengers are to remain seated to wait further instructions.
Yeah, so it's clearly struggling a little bit. I'm not sure how smooth this game's supposed to be on this spec, but I think I'd probably have to drop the resolution or go in and untick some of those more demanding boxes in advanced settings to get something better out of this. This time we'll try it in OpenGL, so we can see we've loaded that 3dfx mini driver we're talking about before. We'll leave it at 800 by 600 and see if it fares any better. And yeah, that just looks so much nicer, doesn't it, in OpenGL? And just a quick reminder of the blockiness of Direct 3D. Direct 3D didn't really compete back then, did it? OpenGL looks way, way, way better than Direct 3D. It might not come across quite so sort of different in the video, but it certainly feels smoother as well, much smoother frame rate it felt like, but it also had its issues at this resolution on these settings, so there was a little bit of stuttering, and I think even in OpenGL it could probably bear the settings tweaking a little bit to try and get some better performance.
Please stay from electrified rails.
This video is really all about just getting the VooDoo up and running on this machine and seeing if it looks nice. I do intend to do a bit more sort of intense performance testing on it. I just wasn't going to do it here because what I want to do is compare it with some other cards. I'm kind of curious to see how the VooDoo2 stacks up against the Banshee, with it being very similar, and also how it compares to maybe the River TNT, which was possibly its major competitor, maybe another couple of cards that were kicking around at that time, but I'll do that in a separate video with a bit more benchmarking and stuff. In the meantime, I thought the simplest thing to do is just maybe drop the resolution down to 640 x 480, and I've just done that in Direct 3D, and we'll see how that looks. I think that brings out the blockiness of the Direct 3D even more. Though it did run smoother, it definitely runs smoother, but even then it still seemed to be jittering around a little bit, and so it definitely needs a bit of a tune-up to play this game, I think, so I'd have a look into that when I take a closer look at actually playing it.
1900 hours in the Level 3 facility. The semi-finals for high-security personnel.
Same thing with OpenGL, 640 by 480, and we'll just have a quick look. And it actually seemed to fare better at this resolution than the Direct 3D, which just seemed to go pretty blocky. But this still looks pretty good, even at this resolution, and ran pretty damn smooth as well. So this is probably the way to play this, either that or tweak some of the advanced settings and see if you can get the resolution back up again. But either way, I think it looks pretty cool, and I think I really need to play this game properly at some point.
68 degrees at all times. This train is inbound from Level 3 dormitories to Sector C.
The next game up was Airfix Dogfighter, and unfortunately this was a bit of a disappointment because it's a It's a DirectX 7 game, and the Voodoo 2 only supports DirectX 6. I believe there are some drivers for DirectX 7 for the Voodoo 2, but they're just drivers that allow the card to exist on a machine that has DirectX 7. The hardware itself doesn't take any advantage at all of the DirectX 7 API, so probably wouldn't be worth running. I think that this game is probably more aimed at sort of Voodoo 3, so I'm just not going to bother with it at the minute. Recoil's installing now, and there's some stuff in the box, but unfortunately it's all in Spanish, so all I can do is look at the pictures. But yeah, it's quite a reasonable little manual, this. I hope you don't need it to play the game, because I can't read it, I don't speak Spanish, I don't understand. Hopefully it's a simple enough game just to pick it up. I think for now I'm just going to stick with 640 by 480. I don't want to do too many more runs. I didn't want to take too much time. It's just to get the thing up and running, get the box closed up, and I'll have a look at getting higher resolutions out of it at another time. So this is Direct 3D, and you know, Recoil is a cool game. Initially it's very difficult to control. The tank feels very skitterish because you steer it by pushing the cursor up against the edges of the screen, which is slightly bizarre, so it doesn't track with the mouse. That took a little while to get hold of, but it makes it kind of feel like a kind of hovercraft type experience. But it doesn't look too bad in Direct 3D. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad at all. Maybe just a little bit jaggery around straight edges and things like that.
ERSKG power.
Right, we've moved into Glide at the same resolution, and it's kind of smooth. It's got that kind of smooth texture, sort of Glide vibe to it. The edges just look a bit smoother and less jaggy. The tank itself doesn't look that much different between one and the other, but I think they did a pretty good job in both of these, actually. The Direct 3D was nice to look at, and the Glide is nice to look at. I think the Glide's nicer to look at, but they're both very playable, and it's a fun game. I'm going to play this all the way through. The last game we're going to look at is European Air War, which is a game I had back in the day. I was quite into flight sims back then, and there's a lot of goodies in the box. There always is with flight sims of that era. So, because I guess the people who played them were also aircraft enthusiasts, so it isn't just an instructional manual on how to play the game. You get a lot of information about aviation in general, the aircraft of the era, which concerns the game you're playing, and a lot of sort of information about aerial dogfighting tactics and such things. There's also a catalogue in here, so we've got some sim type stuff which you'd expect given the kind of person who would buy this game, and some lighter games as well, like Worms 2. We'll fire it up in 640 by 480 Direct 3D again, and the first thing I thought when I started playing with this is possibly the worst kind of game you could have picked to try and demonstrate the difference between Direct 3D and Glide, because apart from the rendering of the cockpit, which is what you spend most of your time looking at, the ground looks okay from a distance, so possibly you'll be able to see some differences in the ground. But generally speaking, in these kind of games you just chase dots, and even if you get quite close to the plane you're trying to shoot down, you never really have time to admire the detail and attention to the detail of the camouflage and all that kind of thing. So possibly not the best, but we'll see how it goes.
They're shooting at the bombers. Let's get them. Fury fighters, you 12 o'clock low.
Firing it up at the same resolution in Glide immediately threw an error. So this was what I was talking about before. and immediately recognised it. It said the map cannot span 2 megabyte boundary. And I thought 2 megabytes, that sounds familiar. And then in the advanced settings that we looked at the beginning of the video, it said that there was a tick box to limit the texture memory to a 2 megabyte limit for glide applications. So I guess that's what we got here. So I had to drop out of the game and go into advanced settings, tick the box to limit that to 2 megabytes and fire it up again. That solved the problem, and then we can take a look at how the game looks in glide mode.
Long nose 190, doing 12 o'clock. This is Fox HalfLife. Nice to see you guys. Over. We are approaching our target. Over.
Now, having said that, I don't think that this game's very good. I do actually think I can see a difference. I think the sort of cloud and the haze and all that kind of stuff looks much better in glide, and the aircraft look less jaggy as you approach them. So yeah, maybe there are some advantages, but albeit more subtle than in a sort of more in-your-face game. So it probably is worth having it after all. There it is. What is actually my first ever VooDoo2 machine. I'd never had a VooDoo2. I don't think I knew anybody who had a VooDoo2. I knew people who had VooDoo1s. But I'm not sure if I ever... The VooDoo2 kind of passed me by back in the day, so I'm really pleased to actually have one of my own. And I'm looking forward to pushing it a little bit more with some other games in the near future. The system looks great. I love the desktop wallpaper, and that's going to be permanent. So I think now I'm just going to have a little dig in my sticker bag and see if I can find anything that might be appropriate for this machine. Got a couple of good ones in here. So I found one for Windows 95, so I'll stick that on. And there's one for the Matrox, which is cool. And then there's this very cool one that I got from Geek and Spiel. He did these like, you know, the boxes, the 3DFX boxes used to get with these crazy demonic faces on them, albeit that this isn't one of those cards. I got some for the cards that I did have. So we've got a VooDoo2 one here with the crazy face on it. So I think that will go very nicely on this machine. Just need to try and figure out where they're going to go. I'll keep the OS ones separate from the two graphics ones, and I'll put those up near the drive bays, and that should look pretty cool. So that's it. Job's done. It looks awesome. My machine is now a kosher 3D monster, whereas I think back in the day the original 266 I had a River 128 in it, and I think that's what I put in this when I first got it, just trying to relive past glories. But yeah, now this is much better, so I'm looking forward to testing it out and having a lot of fun with some glide games. In the meantime, that's pretty much it for now. Like I said, I'll be revisiting the card at some point in the future to do some benching against sort of contemporaries from the time, but that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, it'd be great if you give a thumbs up, leave a comment or subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll hope to see you next time. Bye.